All right, straight up, gear matters. The tools matter. There's no doubt about that in my mind, and I love researching and using new camera gear whenever I have a need for it. But I am of the opinion that in 2024, the camera we use matters very little in terms of image quality, dynamic range, noise performance, or any of the other dozens of metrics we use to measure the quality of a camera. You can search on YouTube and you can find dozens or hundreds of people all showing that the Fujifilm X-H2S is the best, or the Canon R5C, or the Sony A1 or A9 III, or the Panasonic S1H, or that you have to go with a cinema camera like the FX6 or Red Komodo or Sony Burano to achieve the look you want. And I can tell you, as someone who's used all of these cameras, and I do mean all of them, the actual difference in image quality is minor, and that any camera that has been released since 2018 in the right hands can get the results that any of the major buyers or streamers would be perfectly happy with. And that's the same with lenses and microphones. Everything is good enough. So if all the images are good enough, then does camera gear matter at all? What are we even talking about here? Even if every piece of gear can get you the results you want, it still matters in other ways. And so today I want to talk about the ways that camera gear actually matters and how you should judge whether you should switch, upgrade, or buy a new piece of equipment to add to your kit. If you're new here, my name is Curran Sheldon, and I'm an ASC award-winning cinematographer and Oscar-nominated and 2-time Emmy-winning filmmaker. I started this channel to relay all the lessons I've learned in the past 12 years of a knowing absolutely nothing self-taught filmmaker to DPing and creating films that have been bought by Netflix, HBO, PBS, and it premiered at Sundance, Telluride, and Hot Docs. I'm also working on a mini course about the 10 aspects of cinematic interviews. So subscribe to my newsletter below to get 25% off that course when it launches. All right, let's get back to when camera gear actually matters. One of the most important aspects of useful camera gear is when it fits into your workflow. Does it allow you to do the work you set out to do in a streamlined and conducive way? For much of my work in the past 3 years, I have been using the Canon C70. I would love a full frame camera that also has a 6K or 8K sensor, but I have consistently used the C70 because of how well the camera fits into the type of work that I personally do. In the documentary world, the camera is small, it doesn't draw too much attention to itself, and allows me to operate it without a shoulder rig or easy rig or ready rig, which allows me to be less intimidating to subjects or casual bystanders. On top of that, in the fast-paced world of documentary filmmaking, having a camera that has internal NDs, XLRs, an incredible battery life, and timecode is a necessity for me. And if you want all of that in a compact size, the Canon C70 is really the only option. And since I also do quite a bit of YouTube shooting and smaller budget commercial work, I'm often doing my own color grade. And I've always found Canon's color and image to be much easier to work with than Sony, for example. So that rules out the FX6. For some people, Sony's cameras and color fit into their workflow, but I have never been one of those people. For me, using Canon or Panasonic for personal work has always cut my color grading time in half. So that's when it matters to me. It saves me time and fits into my workflow beautifully. So that's one of the most important aspects of camera gear. The second way that camera gear truly matters is that you actually enjoy the process of using it. It's no secret that to make films, you have to pick up a camera and a lens and go out and operate these tools. And for me, the experience of creating images is almost as important as the images themselves. It is one reason why a camera like the Fujifilm X100 series has done so well. It's such an enjoyable camera to use that people just like having it in their hand. As I said, pick up any camera or lens combo and you can get great results. But the actual enjoyment or the process of capturing those great results could vary widely depending on the gear you're using. It is one reason I don't often use mirrorless cameras for my professional work. I find it frustrating to deal with screw-on NDs or matte boxes and not having professional audio connections on the camera itself, even if I love other features like IBIS. It is one reason I also use the Flowtech tripod. It is so quick and easy to deploy that I actually use a tripod when shooting. Whereas I would rather just shoot handheld than use any other tripod because they are too slow in most documentary situations. But perhaps the biggest piece of equipment that determines the actual joy of filming is lenses. And that's where cinema lenses come into play. And specifically, I want to talk about these new cinema zoom lenses from one of my favorite lens companies today. These are the LAOWA Rangers. Quick disclaimer, LAOWA was nice enough to send me these lenses to try out, but not keep, for a couple of months. But they have no input in what I say about these lenses and won't review this video before it goes live. Now, there are plenty of reasons to use photography lenses to shoot video. They're usually lighter, smaller, and cheaper. And they also have autofocus, which is becoming more and more usable by the day. But they also have their drawbacks. The first is that you usually have to change the aperture electronically on the camera, so you can see very distinct exposure changes when doing so, which ruins your shots. Whereas cinema lenses, like these Rangers, have aperture rings on the lens, allowing you to stop down or open up your aperture in a way that is smooth, but not jarring to the audience. The second drawback of photo lenses is that when you zoom, they usually expand and contract, changing the balance of your rig, which is pretty important if you've dialed in your balance just so for a shoulder rig or tripod counterbalance or even on a gimbal. For cinema zooms, I've never come across one that doesn't zoom internally, so that's a huge plus. But the biggest advantage of cinema zooms over photo lenses is the actual experience of manually focusing these lenses. As someone who manually focuses 95% of the time, I find it way more enjoyable and easier to focus with fully manual lenses than the fly-by-wire lenses that most modern manufacturers are creating. The other great thing about manually focusing lenses like these LAOWA Rangers is that they have hard stops at the end of their focus throws, allowing you to physically feel when you have reached the limit of your focus distance. Now, both of these lenses in the set are the same size and weight, as well as having focus and zoom rings in the exact same location, so they're easy to swap in and out of your rig without having to shift a follow focus or zoom rocker, saving you precious time on set. More on that point later. All of these features make cinema zooms just enjoyable to use, and for me, that's no small thing. Photo lenses and autofocus can often be a frustrating, not very fun experience, but the tactile experience of using these Rangers is the opposite. It feels like you are physically actually creating something, which is hard to explain, but I know that I'm more excited to go out and shoot with these when they're on my camera than with a stock 24-105 zoom. As for image quality, there definitely is a difference between most cinema zooms and photo lenses. Now, cinema zooms tend to not be as sharp or detailed, but they do have a more pleasing image, and they have interesting out of focus elements and less of a clinical or stale image that I think a lot of photo lenses produce. The Rangers specifically have a great image. They're not vintage, but they're not characterless either. They're very filmic and alive. For me, it's all about the experience of using the tools. And using the LAOWA Rangers, like other cinema zooms I have used before them, is just a great experience. Add on to that, they are full frame lenses at about half the weight of most cinema zooms and 1/5 the cost, and they are a great alternative to high-end photo lenses. Can photo lenses do the job when it comes to image quality? Of course, that's the whole point of this video. Everything can do the job. But when it is your job to capture images, having the process be as enjoyable as possible is a big win. And the LAOWA Rangers are a lens set with incredible looking images, great size and weight, an incredible price for what they offer compared to the competition, and are so enjoyable to use, you actually want to take them out. The next way camera gear truly matters is in its ability to allow you to move quickly and smoothly. I have been on some small commercial shoots or documentaries where time was plentiful and things moved rather slowly, but that is definitely not the norm. Usually, time is of the essence, and you're consistently racing against the clock to achieve the results you want. In fiction films or commercials, that means getting through enough scenes in a day to not blow past your schedule and therefore budget. In documentaries, you are constantly not only racing against the clock, but always following fast-paced action. Even someone doing something simple like looking through photos on their couch is a time crunch because you can't always ask real people to just sit there for hours on end while you get all the shots you want. As I mentioned before, being able to move quickly is the main reason I dropped way more money than I wanted on a tripod to get the Flowtech. While there are newer and cheaper alternatives on the market, the Flowtech was the only tripod for many years that allowed you to deploy it very, very quickly. And for our film King Cole, this was incredibly important as we shot the vast majority of that film on a tripod. Moving quickly while achieving the results we want is also why I chose the DJI Ronin 4D as my A-cam on a featured documentary that I'm currently DPing. The film not only called for the type of look that only the 4D can achieve, but also allows us to move incredibly quickly in a variety of locations and situations, whether that's following a character walking, riding on a boat, or even working through their research process in their living room. Outside of changing lenses now and again, the Ronin 4D is all I need to get the results I want. On the flip side, on that same documentary, I was using the Sony FX6 as a B-cam for an interview and absolutely lost myself in the menu system for 20 minutes trying to change a few simple settings to help match the 4D. That menu system is so convoluted with so many esoteric terms that it absolutely bogs you down to go through it and set it up. Granted, I am not as familiar with Sony's menu systems as some other systems, but I could make the same changes in a DJI or Blackmagic menu in about 30 seconds, even if it was my first time ever using those cameras. But instead, I lost 20 minutes that could have been used to try out more shooting angles or enhance my lighting or many other tweaks that could have improved my final result. But no, instead, I was knee-deep in Sony menu nonsense. Speaking of the Ronin 4D and Sony menus, gear also matters when it just gets out of the way. When it comes to the Ronin 4D, DJI has done such a great job at making easy to use menus, follow focus tools, lens calibrations, and minimal rebalancing, plug and play transmission and director's monitors, and so many other small details that make the camera easy to use and fast to use that it just gets out of your way, so you can do your job and capture the incredible images you set out to capture in the first place. Other camera gear is not so well thought out, and you often find yourself fighting with it. Or it is your own fault of making a rig so convoluted and overburdened with nonsense gear that you spend precious time fighting with your rig and getting everything to work rather than actually getting incredible shots. So for me, if a piece of gear just gets out of the way of me doing the best job I possibly can, then I am very interested in adding it to my kit. Finally, camera gear matters when it fits smoothly and easily into a full ecosystem. The more streamlined your setup is, the faster you can work, the better you can work, and you can save the production time and money, making you more desirable as a collaborator. I have talked plenty about the 4D, but DJI is a perfect example of building an ecosystem that just works. Canon also did this pretty well with the Canon C300 Mark III and the Canon C70, cameras that have the exact same image quality and sensor, but with very different form factors so you can use them in different scenarios. However, they do have different lens mounts, XLR sizes, and some other differences that make them a bit harder to effortlessly put together. But the brand new C400 and C80 somewhat rectify that issue, so I'm very excited to try those out. But in general, most of the traditional camera companies do a pretty poor job of creating an ecosystem of cameras, lenses, and accessories that all work together nicely. Instead, it leaves it up to you to create an ecosystem for yourself. This is one area I would love to see Canon, Sony, and the rest of the main camera makers out there to take a page out of DJI's book and start seeing all of their products as a single whole rather than as disparate items to be purchased individually. For me, it really is an amateur mistake to obsess over camera gear before you have the jobs and income to warrant it. Instead, just get a solid camera and a great lens and get to work. Tell great stories and make great films, and you'll have plenty of work and money to blow on camera gear in your near future. If you want to make sure you're avoiding other amateur filmmaking mistakes, click on this video here to make sure you're on the right path. I'll see you there.